Let's talk about epigenetics, and we have to understand that epigenetics is a term that is definable only in terms of genetics. They are the opposites, just like up is only defined because of down. And you can define a man and as related to a woman. So epigenetics is defined as genetics. So what is genetics? What are genetics? Genetics are the, and you all probably were following the news over the last 10 years where there was a large international scientific race to categorize every gene in the human genome. And I think they finally came out with somewhere between 25,000 and 35,000 genes. So they categorize them. So they have them, they're now known. But what genes are, is genes, or the genetic code, is merely all the potential responses that a cell can have to its environment. Okay? And that's what it is. A cell's function, or cellular function, is nothing more than a response to some environmental stimuli. Okay, so it may, we think of it as differently. We often think that our cells have an agenda to do something independent of what's happening around it. But the truth is our cells' only agenda is to respond appropriately to the environment, such that the cell maintains its integrity, the tissues that cell makes up maintain its integrity, which become an organ, and that organ maintains its integrity, and that organ is part of a larger organism which has all kinds of organs, such as us, having a heart and a liver and kidneys, etc., and they all function completely and fully and healthfully. And so the biological imperative that all biological organisms have is to regenerate, rejuvenate, and procreate. And so cells are always trying to maintain their integrity and their functional integrity. That's what they do. And they have a library of possible responses to the potential environmental stimuli. And what is the environmental stimuli? That is what epigenetics is. Epigenetics is the environment around a cell. I mean, in simple terms, the environment of light on a flower. It'll open or close. Okay, if the light goes away, it closes. If the light shines on it, it opens. If I put light on into your pupil will close. If I take the light away, your pupil will dilate. Okay, these are just obvious, clear, rapid responses. But that's what's happening on every level in biology. Okay, so genetics is the library of potential responses, and epigenetics is the environment. And if you understand that, it really simplifies the whole process. Now, that's all that's ever happening. So imagine when a new organism is produced, when sperm meets egg and you have a new organism, that new cell is potentially everything that is in that genome, in that genetic library. But what happens, the first thing that starts to happen after there's a few divisions, is each organ system differentiates. And so this group of cells becomes heart, this group of cells becomes liver, this becomes kidneys, this becomes brain, etc. And that's called differentiation. And once they've differentiated, these cells can no longer function otherwise. So now that genetic potential, that library, has been scaled down to only one section of that library. Okay? So no matter what you do to a brain cell, it can only do brain things. It can't do liver things, and it can't do kidney things. Okay, so that's just what happens. And that's what we call the first 3 months of pregnancy, where we call organogenesis, or when the fetus is developing its organs. Okay, after that they start growing. But those first 3 months, which is why it's a very crucial time in pregnancy, because you don't want to disturb anything that will impair the development, the differentiation, the distinction of any particular organ. But anyway, that's the initial thing that kind of limits it. So now you have a bunch of cells. Now this is, I want to distinguish, these are cells that, once cells have differentiated, they are no longer what are called stem cells. And that'll be another talk at some point. We'll talk about stem cells. But stem cells literally don't have these limitations yet. They are prior to differentiation. And that's why they're so exciting. You know, can we possibly use these to, let's say, regrow an organ? You got a damaged kidney, you got a damaged liver, you got a damaged heart. Can we regrow it by giving it stem cells? That's all the research that's going on right now. But we'll talk about that another time. So let's get back to cellular function. What is cellular function? Here's the way it works. A gene signals the production of a particular protein, which then is the mechanism by which the cell exercises its response. Okay, so a cellular response is a protein being produced. Okay, and the protein is produced from the nucleus of the cell, where the genes are. And so, in the world of oncology, in the world of cancer, the conventional perspective is that cancer is a genetic condition. It comes from the nucleus because there is a nuclear or a nucleus mutation. Okay? And that's what everyone is convinced of. Okay. That turns out not to be true. And I hope we can talk about that in kind of the second part of here about when we talk about what is cancer. But right now we're just talking about epigenetics and genetics. So normal cellular function utilizes a system called upregulation and downregulation. And upregulation is simply the turning on certain genes to produce more of something, whether it's a receptor, like a hormone receptor or something like that, you know, like an estrogen receptor. You know, so during pregnancy you're going to have upregulation, you're going to have more and more estrogen receptors so that all the structures necessary for development of the baby or the fetus happen. So you get more estrogen receptors. They upregulate. You get more produced. Okay, so that's a genetic response. Okay, a genetic response to what? To a whole array of hormones and cellular events and things like that. So it's a response. That's what I want you to understand. It's response. It's called upregulation. Downregulation is when a cell turns down its ability to respond to a certain thing. This is a great example is diabetes, type 2. You're eating too much starch, too much sugar, and sugar kills. It turns to glue. It glues the body together. It produces acid. It does all sorts of bad things. However, without it, we're not. So it's necessary to some degree, but any more than that, it starts to be a problem. And that's just like all things in physiology, biochemistry. You need the amount. You need what you need and the amount that you need, and nothing more and nothing less. Okay, and that actually is what when organisms, people, animals live in their biological nature. They live according to their nature, and they meet all their biological requirements, and they don't have to worry about it. But everything is upregulating and downregulating appropriately. But anyway, if I eat too much sugar, what's going to happen is my body's going to say, wait, I can't use that, it's going to harm me, and so it downregulates, and it become now what's called insulin resistant. In other words, insulin no longer can do it, no longer can stimulate that whole process because my body was protecting myself. So it downregulated its response to that. So you can see that these are normal physiological responses. And what we're calling is these are genes being turned on and off. Genes being turned on and off are what have been mistakenly called the cancer process. Right? You have a gene for this cancer. There's no gene for cancer. You have to understand, there's no gene for cancer. There's no gene that says this will be cancer. That's something you must erase from your mind. There's no cancer gene. Never has been, never could be, never would be. Why would nature make a cancer gene? Would that be is that a good possible response to something? No. Consider too, now genes will get turned on and off depending on the environment. So now we go into puberty. Puberty, we see all sorts of physiological and anatomical changes going on. Again, what are we doing? We're upregulating. Upregulating. Okay. And repair. You cut yourself. You turn on certain genes that will heal, and you turn off other genes. Okay. So I want you to understand that. Now, one of the repair genes, a DNA repair gene. Now this happens. How does DNA get damaged? DNA gets damaged by the environment, the epigenetics, producing too many toxins. Okay, and if these toxins can work their way through the cell, into the DNA, and they can actually damage it, or during the DNA dividing, it gets damaged. In any case, there are these genes that repair double-stranded DNA. And they have later since been called BRCA genes, which is what Angelina Jolie made famous. So everybody has BRCA genes. BRCA genes are not a bad thing to have. They are DNA repair. What happens, and what they were talking about with Angelina Jolie, is that she inherited from one of her parents a defective BRCA gene. That is, it wasn't very good at repairing DNA. Okay? Now, she could have inherited it from her mother or her father. It's not a sex-linked inheritance. It means that not only girls but boys can get it as well. Okay? And if your mother has it, the boy has a 50% chance, the girl has a 50% chance. If the father has it, the boy has a 50% chance, and the girl has a 50% chance. Okay. Now, so you're born with, now all genes have 2 chromosomes, right? Remember, we inherited one set of chromosomes from our mom and one set of chromosomes from our dad. Okay? Now, they are both required for a gene to function. Okay? So you're born with one. Angelina was born with one of them. Mutated. So she inherited a gene that was defective. But the other arm, the other chromosome, is not defective. And so she'll be able to repair DNA, double-stranded DNA breaks or any kind of problems with them. In order for her to not be able to repair it and to have what's called, quote, the BRCA gene, unquote, she has to develop a mutation or damage in that second chromosome. And if she acquires that damage in the second chromosome while alive, that's called a somatic mutation, as opposed to an inherited mutation. Okay? So in order for this inherited BRCA potential to occur, there has to be continued toxicity to produce a somatic mutation of the second chromosome in the BRCA gene, in that gene that we now call the BRCA gene. So, what's the answer if you're born with a BRCA gene? The answer is to cut everything out? No. The answer is to not be toxic, is to detox and to clean and to make sure you eat things and drink things that's appropriate for you, okay? And to make sure that you're cleaning out all the waste and that you're getting sleep and all that thing. In other words, the answer to a potential BRCA condition developing fully is to live healthy. And what's the answer if you don't have any BRCA genes? If you weren't even born with one? How do you prevent cancer? By living healthy. So nothing changes. It's the same thing. And I want to make that clear, because if you have two sides, 2 chromosomes on the BRCA, and they're different BRCA genes, but on this one we're talking about, the one that we're talking about, there's a potential for breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, you know. So now, if the person then says, well, I'm going to go now I got my breast taken off, now I'm going to get my ovaries taken out, my uterus taken out, now what? Colon and pancreas going to take out too? I mean, how far do you go with this? Right? So, and I just want to say something that is kind of, we'll put this into perspective. I had a woman who come to us with ovarian cancer, and it had just been diagnosed. She was just found to have it. She just started to develop symptoms, and she had her ovaries removed during a hysterectomy about 6 years prior. So, what do you make of that? I just want you to think about that. Okay, so I've explained the difference between genetics and epigenetics, and actually you have to understand, that's like saying, what's the difference between my front and my back? They're both required. And epigenetics is totally irrelevant if there is no genetics. And genetics is totally irrelevant if there is no epigenetics. So we, in the West, in the scientifically oriented world, have always and always continue to ask, is it this or is it that? And the question is, the answer is never one or the other. The answer is always both. Is up more important than down? It's a crazy concept. Both are required. Epigenetics and genetics just define the absolute same phenomenon. Okay? And that phenomena, and what is it really telling us? It's really telling us that an organism doesn't end at its skin, at the borders of its skin. Because it depends on the environment the organism is in. So the environment is 100% relevant to the organism. And so the question becomes, on some philosophical level, where do you say the organism ends and the environment begins? We won't go there. I just wanted to introduce this philosophical dilemma.